Welcome back, all you kings, queens, and in-betweens, to another card game review here on the channel. And today, we're going to be talking about this game right here, and that is Doomlings. What are your thoughts on this game, Elaine?
Well, I'm happy we've gotten a chance to revisit. I definitely enjoyed it the first time around when we not only reviewed it, but let you all know how to play, so check that video out if you haven't already. Need some guidance. And I feel like I think a lot of the same things I did the first time. It's a very easy game to pick up and play. It's something that you can teach very easily to other people. I think it's something that would appeal to a lot of different age groups and gaming levels, if you will, in terms of people who are more experienced with tabletop and card games and people who just aren't and are just getting started. It's a very good introductory game.
Yeah, and I think it's got enough layers to it where you can add in some like higher level strategy to it as you're getting used to the game and as you're getting used to card games in general. Like you can take it kind of to the next step, even though it's easy to catch on to initially.
I think the only thing that could make that potentially difficult is like most other games, a lot of this is very luck based. Maybe you get a set of cards that just don't integrate very well together. So I feel like certain colors tend to play with one another very well, but not necessarily very well with the other colors available in the game.
I remember our last game that we played, I had like a little engine going. And it was, I was allowed to play. When I played a red card, I would draw 3 cards. And then if I played 1 card per turn, I could play another card. And it was like, I had a lot of cards by the end of the game and it was kind of building off of each other. That made me feel good. I felt like it took it to the next level. Like I built an engine out of the cards that I had. So that kind of shows that that's possible.
Even though this isn't necessarily designed as an engine building game, I do think, going back to my previous point, that certain cards play better with others. For example, there's some cards that score better when you have a higher gene pool, or cards that score extra points when you have
a hand
the
size
same
of a
color,
certain thing.
Sort of thing. Like there's always like a red one and a blue one where you get extra points for playing more of that same color.
Yeah.
In terms of gameplay, this is a game that can be played between 2 and 6 people with just the base game, which I feel like is standard bonus, because I feel like your average game is 2 to 4 players typically. The vast majority of games. This one does 2 to 6. While I think you can definitely play it with 2, I think it's a very different experience than if you're playing with 3 or 4 people, or even 5 or 6. I don't think it's as strong necessarily with 2 people because you're just competing directly with each other and there's not as much thought involved. It's like, I'm always picking on you.
It's very adversarial when you're playing with 2 people.
And I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a, quote, bad game with 2 people. I
No.
just think it's a better experience with like 3 or 4. I'd say 3 or 4 is the sweet spot. I think 5 or 6, depending on how much thought goes into a turn, it can start to feel slightly more bogged down and less of a flowing game.
I feel like that's pretty much any game, though.
That's
Once you get
true.
into 5 or 6 players, you're always going to have a longer turn cycle and more things to think about because you have to keep track of everybody's, in this case, trait pile, or in other cases, the quests they've completed or the board state that they have. The more players is always more things to think about. But I think this scales fairly well, in considering it can go all the way up to 6.
I will say that the one thing that I've really noticed playing this game very frequently, so we could really give an honest review, is that even when you're just playing with 2 players, you go through a good chunk of the deck. So you're seeing cards in quick repetition if you're playing very frequently, or even if you're playing infrequently. I think you'd see a lot of the same cards over and over, especially if you're playing with 3 or 4 people. And while it's nice to see that familiarity so you can start making a strategy around things that you're used to seeing, it can also feel slightly stale, which I think is the benefit of having a game that's constantly putting out expansions so you can have a new experience.
And we've gone through and added Overlush cards that we have to it. So that's adding extra cards. So you would assume that it would feel like you're not going through all of those cards over and over again, but you still go through a lot of the deck. And when you're playing with a lot of players, well, in this case, 4 to 6 players, you are going through most of the deck. It kind of feels like you're hitting the same cards. But I mean, if you're going to go through the whole deck or most of the deck, it's going to feel like you're drawing through the cards because you're drawing through the cards. And the only way to fix that would be to add a ton of extra cards, which they have been doing, just adding more cards in general. And that seems to be something that they want to continue doing.
How do you feel about game balance? Because they essentially have what you might call in Magic a vanilla card, where it's just a number associated with the card, and then you have cards with abilities or cards where you take an action, not necessarily the same same thing. There's some cards, let's say you raise your gene pool, but it's not considered an action.
I feel like I find vanilla cards in my hand most of the time, and unless I have a card that allows me to get bonuses off of playing ones that have a value of 1 or 2, so on and so forth, or a reason why I'd want to play vanilla cards, I typically try to avoid playing them and end up discarding them. If you get a really bad opening hand, I feel like it can feel kind of bad when you start out the game because it sets you back. Then the ages can completely screw you up. Like you can have a great strategy. There's been several times where I've had a great strategy, I've had a good opening hand, and I've started to play them out, and then an age will hit, and either I can't play the color or I have to discard my hand. One game that really frustrated me was when I had a really good hand, and it made me pass the hand to the opponent to the left, which when we were playing with 2 people, it was just us. So I passed her my hand, and she passed me her hand, and her hand was terrible, and it screwed my game. Literally, I had a great strategy going, and then I just got past her hand, and I was like, wow, I gave you a really good hand, and you gave me a terrible hand. I basically lost the game here.
It's definitely a lot more punishing in general when you have a bad start or maybe even just a rough end when you're in just a 2-pile game or 2-person game, rather.
But, I mean, I think it scales fairly fine. Like, you're not going to have any card game where you're always going to be able to kind of balance it perfectly around all types of players and all numbers of players. And this one, I think, does a good job at it. About as good a job as you're going to do.
I would agree. I think it's very hard to be able to consider in every situation all variables, all types of players, all player counts. Like sometimes you just get really unlucky and the game can feel a little rough. But then the next time around, maybe you do better and it's a lot more pleasant. But in general, I think it's a lot more pleasant an experience because it feels less punishing with that 3 to 4 player sweet spot, if you will.
Yeah. I like the art. I think the effects are simple enough where you're not sitting there going, oh, what does this mean? What is the variance? Reading the card explains the card. So it's a simple game to teach to other people. And that's always a thing that I'm looking for because I want to be able to play with varied groups of people. And I don't want to have to sit there and spend 45 minutes explaining a game or have to play a practice round. I feel like this is not a game where you have to play a practice round. We've never had to play a practice round. So I think it's got that going for it. And yeah, it's a fun game. It's colorful. It's got fun little characters and little things that they have them do. And I think, it does a good job.
Overall, I would say it's family friendly. It's very teachable. It's very budget friendly. It averages about $25 when it's not on sale. It's shelf friendly. And I think the components are really well done too. It's got a thick cardstock with rounded edges, so you're not going to be poking yourself. If you've ever played Dragonwood, I would describe the cards like that. I feel like they're about the same thickness. They've got that same texture and they've got the rounded edges just as a point of comparison. And overall, I think they've done a really good job, and I'm very happy that they've added expansions so you can keep adjusting the experience and keep enjoying everything that this game has to offer.
And we'll probably be talking about Imaginary Ends pretty soon. So that's the full expansion that they released. They have Overlush, but that's, just adding cards. But we'll talk about Imaginary Ends also in a separate video.
Spoilers.
Well, and we'd like to thank the people from Doomlings that, sent us updated copies. We have the Kickstarter copy. You have the big Kickstarter version.
The fancy gold box.
Yeah.
It's on bougie and shiny.
But they sent us updated versions. They sent us Overlush. And they sent us Imaginary Ends and a gold pack so we could, experience the game as an updated version of the game. So we, revisited it and, putting out our updated thoughts on the game. So if Doomlings is something that you are interested in, then let us know down in the comments. Let us know any questions that you have or any recommendations for ways we can play or your favorite cards or things like that. Anything you want to let us know down in the comments. Just tell us about it. Yes. Like the video if you like it. Subscribe to the channel to see more Doomlings content, to see more of our other content. And ring that bell so you know what's up. We will catch you in the next one.
Bye, guys. Prepare for the end of the world.
Hi, Tisha Valenza, aka Poison Ivy, and you've just been watching King's Entertainment Reviews. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch.